which is Obeid Zakani.
Hello, my name is Maritash Garamani, a political science student, and I've taken this course due to my interest in classical Persian literature, which comes from an admiration for Ferdowsi and his long-lasting effect on Iranian culture since a very young age. My focus in this group has been on the political philosophy of Zakani and the conceptual similarities between Obeid Zakani and Hafiz.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I'm currently in my last semester of my Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, although my interests have always strayed towards literature. My particular interests in literature are those written by people of color, which consequently have led me to this course. My role in our group project has been to discuss the social politics reflected in Zakani's The Ethics of Aristocrats.
Hi, my name is Hannah Jang and I'm a psychology major. I'm taking this course because I'm interested in Persian literature. I speak Urdu, which I learned in North India. As also I learned a little bit of Dari, which I forgot everything while I was visiting Afghanistan. So I'm taking this course.
Hi, I'm John. I study political science and English literature. I'm taking this course because I absolutely admire English literature and I would love to spread outwards from English, and I also have this deep fascination for Qawwali music. So before we end this, I think we should do a little bit of biographical information on Zakani. Zakani was a very accomplished person in all sorts of arts. He also had this deep disgust towards the behavior of Turks in Persia at the time. He hated the excessive flattery and corruption, and that's what made him become this shameless poet and author. So in my study of Cat and Mouse, or Mushagarba by Obeid Zakani, I've been looking at two main secondary sources. One of them gave me a nice moral that really made my understanding go beyond the playful, literal meaning, like the playful conflict of cat and mouse. And the other one gave a historical, analytical breakdown of the text, and that made me understand his use of rhetoric, and it made me go beyond the literal meaning of cat and mouse, and also like understanding the true symbolism of cat and mouse. So for the final work, I'm really interested in uncovering the meaning with the historical context so that I can get an understanding of what the poem would mean to Zakani's contemporaries. For example, how the Turkish abuse would come into play, the kafif meter, the allusion to Hafiz, his use of rhetoric, and the history of Abu Ishaq that really colors the poem. I'm also interested in his use of satire, how it can be interpreted as a what to do or what not to do guide, and it's sort of reminiscent of political theory, and specifically Machiavelli's The Prince, because it is also a what to do and what not to do guide for rulers, and also how the virality of emotions can come into play in his satire. As a teacher himself, I believe Obeid Zakani understood that humor and the anger that it produces can create a much more memorable and powerful effect in poetry.
After all, poetry is an integral part of any nation's culture, history, and literature. Political poetry, on the other hand, has been used as a method of criticism and protest against the rulers of any given time in order to influence the hearts and minds of the people at their times, and was used as an outcry for reforms. Thus, Zakani's Cat and Mice is an embodiment of a struggle against corruption and tyranny during Zakani's time. On the other hand, the writings by Ali Jan Bozorgi, specifically the political philosophy of Obeid Zakani's poetry, sheds light on political philosophy in the field of Islamic theology and Persian literature, and takes note of Ibn Khaldun's teachings, which is crucial for the field of political philosophy in the Muslim world, while also pointing out to elements of political philosophy from the Safavid era and even Plato's teachings. Therefore, I've used his work to further develop my writings about Zakani, particularly his effect on Perso-Islamic political philosophy. Subsequently, Nikdar Asla's writing, called Hafez and Obeid Zakani's Conceptual Integrations, points out the similarities between these two 8th century writers, one in the genre of satire and the other in literary poetry. This has been an era with great ups and downs in the socio-cultural framework of Iran. These social issues have had tremendous effect on the thoughts of both Hafez and Obeid Zakani, and have resulted in conceptual integrations between these two figures.
My focus in our group is to examine the oppressive atmosphere in Iran towards the satirical artist, as well as Zakani's motivation for creating such satires under political oppression in Iran. So I think it is important for us to talk about the troubles and difficulties that satires were faced through the political oppression of that time. And we should ponder about what led him to endure and persevere difficulties to maintain his unfiltered critical voice in his satires and understand his passion and level of seriousness in his criticism. By looking at this, we'll be able to get a better insight in interpreting his works that could be easily seen as just humorous at the face value. My work is based on two main sources. One is course called Iranian Political Satires, and a part of this book is dedicated to analyzing Zakani's motivation for creating some of his well-known satirical works. And another source is an article by Kausar, and he's an Iranian-Canadian journalist and a cartoonist who went through political oppression himself for his satirical work. Because it was not easy for me to find the source that Zakani himself directly describing about the oppression he had to face, I chose this modern day author who is essentially going through the similar situation as Zakani and gives us the realistic understanding about how serious was the death threats and political oppression for him that he had to flee from Iran to North America because of his satirical works. And it is not difficult to assume for us that in Zakani's time, the situation wouldn't have been no easier for him. Kosar also talks about how Zakani is a pioneer during that time among satirists for continuing the satirical work under such hardships that would have been worse off than his own.
So one of my secondary sources is Satire, Humor, and the Construction of Identities by Masih Zakavit. His article focuses on a narrowed overlook into satire and its relation to identities, ranging through racial, ethnic, national, religious, and gender realms. Zakavit provides an understanding on how, even across these spectrums of identity, satire bridges together commonalities which are paradoxically relayed through oppositions. Zakavit discusses the ethics of aristocrats in relation to the construction of religious and gender identities. He mentions that social identities can be categorized into two groups, ascribed or adopted. Within the realms of religion and gender in Zakani's work, it is apparent that these two identities can be argued as being ascribed. The emphasis of there being a code of ethics is ascribing a way of performative living, especially to those who live religiously. As such, women do not adopt their gendered roles, but are rather ascribe them through societal conventions and upbringings while being immersed in a deeply patriarchal culture. My second secondary source is an excerpt from the book The Education of Women and the Vices of Men, 2 Qajar tracts, entitled Part 3, Women in Persian Satire by Hassan Javadi. Javadi touches on how satire overwhelmingly takes the perspective of a man. He also overviews his insight into the 3 versions of women typically seen in Persian satire: women in general, saintly women, and the beloved. Through this feminist lens, a critical analysis of Zakani's The Ethics of Aristocrats reveals how he has given women the role of the beloved, but from a more lustful gaze. As seen in Chapter 3 on chastity, Zakani puts emphasis on the sexual role women play in a man's ethics, as he either chastises himself therefore bringing about sorrow in rejecting himself of pleasure, or he will sleep with whomever he pleases, so that his life may not be burdensome. Since Zakani's work is satirical, however, it will be necessary to take into account the humorous aspects of the junctures of comedy and misogyny.